Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Apple booth. My name is Joseph, and it is my extreme pleasure to bring to you Motion, the newest application from Apple. Motion is a real-time motion graphics design application. Now, the best way to understand Motion is to see a demo, so let's go ahead and do that now. I'm starting off here with a simple butterfly animation. If you look in the top left corner there, you'll see the animation preview. Now, I'll just drag and drop that right onto the center of the project and hit play. And that's all there is to it. I now have my first piece in here. Now let's go ahead and get a second butterfly. I'll take the same object, drop it on. I'm going to scale this butterfly down a little bit and offset its position on the timeline. So now I have two butterflies slightly out of sync with each other. Now I'm only going to focus on the first 100 frames or so of my project here. So let's go ahead and drag my out point here on the looping preview down to 100 frames. So now I'm only looking at the first 100 frames there. Great, let's go ahead and get a couple more butterflies in here. We'll take a third one up here, scale him down, and offset that one as well. And finally, I'll take one more off to the corner here, scale that, and offset it too. Great, so now we have 4 butterflies on the canvas. All of them are at different sizes, playing back at different times, so none of them look like they're actually the same file. Okay, now I want to start working on behaviors. If you look at this project, you'll see that you have a central butterfly and 3 little butterflies surrounding it. And what if you wanted to animate the 3 little butterflies flying around the big central one? Well, if you were working with keyframes, that would be quite a bit of work. But with behaviors, I'll show you just how easy this can be. First thing I need to do is select the central butterfly. Then under Add Behaviors, I choose Simulations, Vortex. And that applies a vortex command to that object. Now, everything else in the scene is being caught up in its vortex. You can see the other butterflies now swirling around it as if caught in a whirlpool. And if I want to make adjustments to those settings, I can simply bring up the dashboard and adjust the parameters of the vortex. For example, increase the drag coefficient on it so that the butterflies get pulled a little bit closer in towards the central one. If I want to change the direction of the butterflies, simply switch from clockwise to counterclockwise, and the butterflies start going the other way. So far, so good. Now let's just say that you show this to the client loves it, but the client says, could you please have that center butterfly flying across the screen, but I really like the animation thing, so I want to make sure that you keep all that while the butterfly moves. And you're thinking, well, if I keyframe this, that would be a lot of work. But fortunately, I was using Motion, so all I have to do is add a new behavior onto that central butterfly. In this case, basic motion, throw. The throw allows me to literally throw that butterfly anywhere on the screen. You can see now how the butterfly is moving across the screen, and the central ones are just floating around him. In fact, if I want to change this to a different direction and speed up its velocity a bit, I can do that, and the vortex still applies to everything else in the environment. Did you notice that I never stopped playback? The entire time I was doing this, the project was playing. And that's just the fantastic real-time speed of Motion. I'm going to close this project out, create a new one, and start from scratch to build a proper promo. If you notice up in the window up here, I have 4 different video clips of various car shots. Let's go ahead and preview one of those. If I click on it here, you'll see the preview up in the top or left corner. And what I'm going to do is basically just select all of these and drag and drop them, not onto the canvas, but instead onto the miniature timeline. And when I do that, you'll notice I get a pop-up window allowing me to choose between a composite edit or a sequential edit, meaning that those video clips will be stacked on top of each other or back-to-back, head to tail. So let's go ahead and do a sequential edit and then click play. And this is essentially just what you would see in a video editing application. I have all 4 shots laying down head to tail on the timeline. Now, as you can see up here, the video does not match the size of the canvas. So let's go ahead and resize and reposition that. I'll just move that like so, grab the corner here and resize that clip just like that. This is meant to be a promo for television, so I need to get some text in here. So let's go ahead and get the text. I need to go up here to the tool palette and grab my text tool. With that selected, I can simply click on the canvas and type in what I want. So I'm going to type in coming up next. Now I'm going to assign a new font for this, but before I do, think about this. How do you normally go about choosing the font for your project? Maybe you're going to look at a printed list of fonts to choose just the right typeface. Or maybe you have a piece of software that shows you every font listed in its own typeface. You can see what that font looks like. Well, we think there's a better way. Within Motion, I can simply scrub through my list of fonts and preview every single one of these fonts directly on the canvas against the project as it's built and playing back in real time. Now I'm just going to go ahead and leave it at that serpentine font there, and I'll set that to oblique and change the size on that a little bit. As you can see, I can scale that however I like. Let's go ahead and make it a little bit smaller, just about like there. I'll take a basic motion throw, just the same thing you saw on the butterflies, and push that across the screen. And there it goes. Now what I want to do next is add a basic opacity ramp to this. I want to fade this in and then fade it out again. Now if you're used to working with keyframes, you know that you just grab the pen tool, click on the opacity ramp, and fade that in and back out. Pretty easy. But in Motion, it's even easier. Inside of Motion, I have the ability to add a behavior called the fade in, fade out. With that behavior applied to the text, I can simply click and drag on that behavior in my dashboard and have that fade in and fade out very quickly over time like that. And that's all there is to it. Now let's get some more text on here. Let's go ahead and grab the same font that I used before, but this time I will set it to a bold oblique. I'm also going to reposition that a little bit, just about there. And once again, I'm going to animate it. Now you've seen me animate the text before by going up to Add Behaviors and choosing the behaviors from here. But I can actually get to my behaviors a second way, and that's from the Library palette. Inside the Library palette, I have all my behaviors listed, and as you can see, there are 74 different behaviors in here. Now these behaviors are listed into subcategories, and if I click on my text animation subcategory, you see the specific behaviors that were designed for text. So let's go ahead and try some of these. I'll start with basic text tracking. Drop that on, and as you can see, the text is now tracking out over time. Now I'll try another behavior here. I'll take type on, drag and drop that one on. And now I have a combination of effects. The text is both being typed on and spreading out over time. And that was two different behaviors combined, and of course I can adjust the parameters of those. And then if I wanted to, I could take the combination of those behaviors and save them off as a separate single behavior. So I can add that to my projects later. And that's exactly what I'm going to do here, is load on a behavior that I saved before. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that type on, and from here I will select the text tracking and delete it as well. And then I'll go back to my file browser, onto the desktop, into my presets folder, and open up Type Slam. Type Slam is my own custom preset that I've just added on, and as you can see here, it's a much more dynamic effect. However, if you look at it closely, it just seems a little bit slow. I want to speed things up a little bit. Well, you'll notice on the timeline here that the effect itself is sitting on the timeline just like any other object. It's sitting there as Type Slam 2. Now, as that object sits on the timeline, that means that I can actually affect it like any other object on the timeline. So, for example, I can go in here and simply shorten it up a bit. So if I go and shorten that up to a quick 1 second, and then reset my out point, this time I've grabbed the playhead, I'm scrubbing it to where I want the out point to be, then hit a keyboard combination that assigns the new out point, and as soon as I let go of the mouse, playback starts up again. So now I have that Vintage Racers text playing back with that effect on it much more quickly, and if I want to soften that up a bit, I can simply increase the spread on here and give it a much nicer feel. Now I want to add some motion, throw that thing across the screen, so let's just do that with a basic behavior called throw. Throw that motion across the screen, and there we go. So now I have my coming up next text, fading in, fading out, and the Vintage Racers text popping onto the screen and then scrolling across. Now it's time to make it look really cool. And to do that, I'm going to use the particles. Let's go ahead into the library here. And from the library, I'll click on particle emitters. And as you can see, I have 120 emitters to choose from in here. That's 120 presets that you can work with, modify, enhance however you like. That's a pretty cool effect. Maybe this one will look good on this project. So let's just try it out. I'll simply drag and drop this onto the project, release it, and it starts playing back in real time. At this point, I decide, I don't really like that effect. I want to delete it. Well, no time lost there because I didn't have to render it. I'll just delete that, and it's gone. The piece that I do want to add, I've actually already saved off as a preset. So back to my file browser, onto the desktop here, you'll see I have something called Flying Slice. Let's just go ahead and add that Flying Slice onto my project, drag and drop it on there, and we can see exactly what that looks like. Now its position isn't quite right, so that's okay. That's easy to fix. I'll just grab that slice and reposition it how I like while it's playing. Now this particle emitter is simply a couple of simple little Photoshop files turned into particles and colorized inside of Motion. So now you want to know exactly how you create these on your own. You might think it's really complicated, but I'm going to show you right now just how easy it can be. Let's go ahead back to the file browser here. I'll click on my Pictures folder, and in the Pictures folder, I'll open up Mini Cars. The Mini Cars folder shows me a series of pictures. You'll also might notice that they're named sequentially. Car small 1 through car small 30. Now Motion has the ability to take a sequentially numbered list of files and automatically turn them into a movie. With one click of the button, I have this movie now that has been assembled from those stills. And if you look at the top left corner, you'll see the preview of that movie. Now that movie on its own, or that animation on its own, isn't terribly useful. It's just a bunch of stills playing back at 30 frames per second. But that is going to be the basis for my particle generator. So let's go ahead and create that. Here's the movie. Drag and drop that right onto the project there. Play it from the top, and as you can see, the movie's simply playing back, as you would expect. However, if I click on Make Particles, suddenly that movie gets turned into a particle emitter. Now this is just way too much going on, so let's isolate that. I'll solo it, and I'm also going to take the birth rate of those particles down a little bit. Let's get them down to a slightly more reasonable level here. A lot of people look at particles and they think of things like flames or smoke, and while that's really cool, it doesn't really necessarily apply to a lot of jobs that you might be doing. However, I'm going to show you how this crazy particle emitter can get turned into something very useful and very interesting for this project. So back to the emitter here. I'm going to unsolo that, so I'm back with the regular project, and I'm going to open up the layers palette for the first time. As you can see here, you have a full layers palette that gives you just another view of your project. So you have both a timeline and a layers palette, two different metaphors to work within. On this layers palette, I can see my car small emitter. There's the original movie that I'd created. What I want to do is use behaviors. Now I'm going to go in here and choose the right behavior. Under libraries, click on behaviors again, and I'll choose one called attracted to. Now I'll take this attracted to behavior and add it onto car small. I'll just take the rectangle tool, draw a little shape on the canvas here, and then take that rectangle and drag and drop it onto the attracted to. And suddenly those particles are being attracted to that rectangle. Now I can actually grab that rectangle here and move it around the screen however I like. And then when I do that, you'll see the particles following it around. Now, as you can imagine, I can animate that square, have it fly around wherever I like, and that can be part of my movie. Or, if I want to, I could just hide that square. Let's just go ahead and do that, make it invisible, and still use that as the attractor for the particles to follow around. I'm going to change the emitter shape from a point to a line. So let's go ahead and pipe in the proper values. So there we have it, 360 to 360. It's across the entire width of the project. And then I'll change a few more values. I'll go down here to birth rate, and I'll set that to 1. And I'll set the life fairly low to 2. And then I'll change the life range to 1. And the speed I'll finally set to 0. Let's turn the attractor back on. To do that, I simply grab the rectangle here, drop that onto the attracted to, and suddenly those particles are being generated and being attracted to that center particle piece, and it's looking great. The entire thing is on here in a single layer, so I'm going to go ahead and take that entire layer and reposition that using my properties palette here. Instead of typing in numbers, I can simply click and drag on the virtual sliders here to position that layer wherever I like it. Or, of course, I could click and drag on the canvas itself. Back onto the desktop here, I have this thing called the arcs emitter. Now the arcs emitter is actually my station ID. So I'm going to go ahead and take that arcs emitter and add it to my project. Just drop it on like so, right in the middle. And as you can see it playing back there, I have these little particles flying around. Looks pretty cool, not the kind of thing you would expect to be a particle emitter, but it is. Now the next thing I need to put on is the actual network number. Here we have, it's channel 7, as you can see already animated. So let's just go ahead and add that in. And to do that, I'll drag it directly onto the layer in the layers palette, just so that I know that that is actually going into the same layer as the arcs emitter there. Let's go ahead and grab that logo, that splashing logo on there, and back in the inspectors, I will reset its position to the center so that it lines up with that arcs emitter. Now that both of those pieces are on the same layer, that means I can take the entire layer and reposition it on my timeline or on my canvas just like that. Music was the final piece to add, so let's go ahead back into the file browser, into the music folder, take this race mix and drag and drop it on. Once that's in place, we can now play this from the top. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Motion. Thank you very much for your time today. I hope you enjoyed the demo. Have a great day.